Authorities in Mexico say at least 62 people have been killed following a wave of violence that broke out after the killing of the country's most wanted man, El Mencho.
Of one of the country's most feared drug lords, known as El Mencho.
Known as El Mencho, he was one of the most wanted men in both Mexico and the United States. His killing has sparked violence across the country, resulting in dozens of deaths, including several Mexican National Guard troops.
Mexico's most powerful drug kingpin.
One of the country's most feared drug lords.
On Sunday morning, February 22, 2026, nobody had any idea that the most wanted drug lord on the planet was hiding in a place like this. It was a small, hilly tourist town in Mexico called Tapalpa, the kind of place with old stone roads, little souvenir shops, and beautiful green mountains all around. But just outside this pretty town, deep inside the jungle, was a cabin where El Mencho had been quietly hiding. El Mencho was the guy the US government had put a $15 million bounty on. He was so good at staying hidden that barely any photos of him existed. He had been caught by police back in the 1980s and 1990s, but nobody really knew what he looked like anymore. On February 20th, Mexican intelligence got a big tip. They were keeping an eye on someone close to El Mencho's girlfriend, and they figured out that this person had taken the girlfriend to a quiet, out-of-the-way property near Tapalpa. This turned out to be the exact same place where El Mencho was hiding. On February 21st, his girlfriend left the place, but El Mencho stayed back with his bodyguards. The couple had visited him there, and once they drove away, authorities confirmed he was still inside. The Mexican forces finally had the chance they had been waiting years. Before sunrise on February 22nd, Mexican Special Forces, the National Guard, the Air Force, and the Army completely surrounded the place from every direction. The operation was mostly carried out on the ground with only a few helicopters involved. As soldiers moved in, cartel gunmen started shooting. The security forces shot and killed 4 cartel members. But El Mencho managed to slip away with his bodyguards and ran toward a wooden cabin area nearby in the jungle. The soldiers chased him down, and shots were fired again. Eventually, soldiers caught El Mencho in very bad shape, along with 2 of his bodyguards. He was rushed by helicopter to Mexico City, but died before he could get there. A former DEA chief said this was one of the biggest moments in the entire history of the drug trade. But the story doesn't stop there. What happened after his death was something nobody could have imagined. The news of his death set the whole country on fire. But first, who exactly was El Mencho, and how did his cartel get so powerful in the first place? Back in 1992, somewhere in California, police caught a small-time drug dealer who was selling heroin. He was thrown in jail and later kicked out of the country. Nobody thought for even a second that this same guy would one day become the most wanted drug lord in the world. This story starts in 1966 in a city called Aguililla in the Mexican state of Michoacan, a poor area where illegal marijuana farms were tucked away in the mountains. El Mencho's real name was Nemesio Jose Oseguera Cervantes. His family grew avocados for a living. He quit school in 5th grade to help out at home and started working on the farm. But by the time he was 14, he was already running marijuana fields. In the 1980s, he moved to California chasing a better life, the classic American dream. But instead of finding success, he ended up going down a criminal path. In 1986, San Francisco police arrested him for stealing and carrying a loaded gun. They also suspected he was dealing meth. After years of running from the law and getting into trouble, undercover cops caught him selling heroin at a bar in San Francisco in 1992. He got 3 years in prison. In January 1997, he was let out on parole and sent back to Mexico. He was 30 years old, and this is where things get really wild. After coming back to Mexico, Mencho became a police officer. Yes, you read that right. A guy who had been convicted of drug dealing became a cop. He worked on the force for a few years, and during that time, he learned exactly how the whole system worked from the inside. He saw how easily Mexican cops could be paid off with just a little bit of money. He saw what it took to make an officer look the other way, and he figured out all the weak spots in the system. That knowledge would later become one of his biggest advantages. Around that same time, he married a woman named Rosalinda Gonzalez Valencia, who came from a family deeply involved in the cartel world. That marriage was basically his ticket into organized crime. He started out as a bodyguard and hitman for the Valencia family's Milenio cartel. But by 2010, all the big leaders of that cartel had either been killed or locked up. Mencho wanted to take charge, but nobody gave him the position, so he walked away and started his own crew. He founded the Cartel de Jalisco New Generación, or CJNG for short. Jump ahead 5 years to May 1st, 2015, when the Mexican military launched an operation called Operation Jalisco to capture El Mencho. They sent in military helicopters, but the CJNG had already found out about it. The cartel's gunmen were waiting, armed with rocket launchers and heavy machine guns. When the helicopters came in, the cartel literally shot them out of the sky. We heard a boom like a bomb. They took down the aircraft. They shot it down. Only 9 out of 18 people on board survived, and even they were badly hurt. Think about that for a second. A drug cartel had shot down a military helicopter. This cartel was so powerful that they went on to burn dozens of buses, trucks, and gas stations in different parts of Mexico. The government had to send in 10,000 troops just to get things under control. A federal investigator said that since the days of Pablo Escobar, no criminal group had ever gone head-to-head with the government so aggressively and so openly. So how did the CJNG get this strong? It all comes down to 2 things: meth and fentanyl. The CJNG wasn't just your regular drug cartel. They ran things more like a military outfit. According to DEA estimates, at least 1/3 of all drugs entering the US by air and sea in 2019 came from this one cartel alone. By 2018, they had over 100 meth labs running across Mexico. The money they made from meth was way more than what you could make from cocaine or heroin. And the best part for them was that unlike cocaine, which needs coca plants grown in South America, meth could be made right at home by just importing cheap chemicals from China. Some experts believe the CJNG had over $20 billion sitting in their war chest. They controlled Mexico's entire port system, especially the port of Manzanillo, where all the raw materials came in from China to make their drugs. Chemicals, shipping, storage, everything ran through one single entry point that they owned completely. But even scarier than meth was another product the CJNG had big plans for. I'll get to that in a moment, but first, we need to talk about something that most people completely skip over. How did the cartels in Mexico get so powerful that they could actually go to war with their own government? Imagine a Mexican mayor whose monthly salary is 30,000 pesos. One night, an SUV pulls up outside his house. Cartel guys are sitting inside. In one hand, they're holding a briefcase stuffed with 500,000 pesos. In the other hand, they're holding a gun. They give the mayor a simple choice: take the money or take the bullet. In Spanish, they call it plata o plomo, which literally means silver or lead. This isn't a made-up story. This kind of thing happens every single week in hundreds of cities all across Mexico. But how did this whole system even come to exist? It was actually built by a political party called the PRI, the Institutional Revolutionary Party. The PRI ran Mexico for 71 straight years as basically a one-party state from 1929 all the way to 2000. The central government under the PRI was so weak and corrupt that instead of going after organized crime, it started cutting deals with them. This arrangement was called the Plaza System, and the rules were pretty simple. The cartels would keep public violence to a minimum and would leave PRI officials alone. In return, everyone from local mayors to state governors would get regular cash payments, bribes called mordida, which means the bite. Essentially, the entire country was on the cartel's payroll every single week. Then, in the year 2000, the PRI finally lost power, and that whole system fell apart overnight. In 2006, President Felipe Calderón decided it was time to fight back and officially declared war on the cartels. He deployed thousands of soldiers and worked closely with the US to track down Mexico's top drug bosses. Together, they managed to kill or arrest 25 out of Mexico's top 37 drug kingpins. But here's the problem with that approach. Every time you take out one drug lord, someone else just steps up to take his place. Every time you remove one kingpin, 2 more appear. All that military pressure ended up breaking the big cartels into smaller pieces, and those smaller pieces turned into even more violent and unpredictable gangs that were much harder to control. Because of the rising violence and public frustration, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, known as AMLO, became president in 2018. He came in with a completely different idea. His slogan was "Hugs, not bullets." His thinking was straightforward: stop fighting the cartels with guns and instead tackle the root causes like poverty and unemployment. If people have jobs and opportunities, they won't need to join cartels. He said they would stop the old strategy of using force and instead fix the deeper reasons why crime exists in the first place. But unfortunately, it didn't work out the way he hoped. The military crackdown hadn't solved the problem, and the social investment plan didn't get off the ground properly either. Neither approach delivered real results. And now here's the part that is truly shocking, the part that most people don't want to talk about. While Americans were the ones dying from the drug crisis, America itself played a massive role in creating it. And this wasn't just one bad decision, it was a long chain of mistakes, one after another, where America kept making things worse. The first one goes back to the early 1980s. The CIA was secretly supporting a rebel group called the Contras, who were fighting against the socialist government of Nicaragua. To fund and train these rebels, the CIA ended up working through Mexican drug cartels. In July 1990, the Washington Post revealed that the CIA had been training Contra rebels at the personal ranch of Mexico's biggest drug lord at the time, Rafael Caro Quintero, near Veracruz. The CIA was openly using a drug trafficker's own property, and this wasn't a rumor or a wild conspiracy theory. It was proven in an official U.S. Senate investigation called the Kerry Committee Report, published in April 1989. America helped build these cartels up to serve its own political goals, and then those same cartels turned into its biggest nightmare. The second big mistake was NAFTA in 1994, the North American Free Trade Agreement. This deal cut down trade barriers between the US, Canada, and Mexico. Some officials had already warned that NAFTA would basically swing the border wide open for drug smuggling, but they were brushed aside and ignored in congressional debates. Before NAFTA, around 7,500 trucks crossed the US-Mexico border every single day. After NAFTA, that number shot up to 12,000 trucks a day. There was physically no way to search every single truck, so the drug trade exploded almost overnight. America had accidentally built a superhighway for drugs. But NAFTA had another really damaging side effect. American farmers started flooding Mexico with their cheap, heavily subsidized crops, and Mexican farmers simply couldn't compete with those prices. Corn prices for Mexican farmers crashed by more than 65%. Between 1991 and 2007, around 2 million farmers across Mexico were forced to abandon their land because they just couldn't survive anymore. And those millions of desperate, jobless farmers ended up becoming the foot soldiers of the drug cartels. The third problem is guns. Between 2014 and 2018, a massive 70% of all firearms recovered in Mexico were originally bought in America. There are 6,700 gun dealers operating in the US-Mexico border region alone. That works out to 3 gun shops for every single mile of border. The Mexican government estimates that every year, around 200,000 firearms are smuggled from the US into Mexico. And the fourth point is honestly the most unbelievable of all. Under something called Operation Fast and Furious, American agencies deliberately and knowingly allowed over 2,000 weapons to cross the border into Mexico. The idea was to track these guns and follow them all the way to the criminal organizations using them, but they completely lost track of the weapons, and later on, those very same guns were used to kill Americans. So when you put it all together, America first helped the cartels grow by working with them, then flung the border wide open through a trade deal, then allowed 200,000 guns a year to pour into Mexico, and then when people started dying because of those guns, they sent in 2,000 more weapons and called it a plan. Now let's come back to that other product, the one the CJNG had identified as its future and its biggest moneymaker. That product is fentanyl. Fentanyl is a man-made opioid drug, and it is terrifyingly dangerous. It's 50 times stronger than heroin. Picture just a few tiny grains of sand sitting on your hand. That little amount, just 2 milligrams, is enough to kill a person. And the money involved is absolutely crazy. Making one fentanyl pill costs about 10 cents, but that same pill sells on the street for anywhere between $10 and $30. A cartel might spend just $50,000 to produce a whole batch and walk away with $20 million in profit. The damage this drug has caused is heartbreaking. In 2023, around 73,000 people in the US died from synthetic opioid overdoses, and about 70% of those deaths were caused by fentanyl. The CJNG was right at the center of this crisis. Back in 2013, El Mencho's own son, known as El Menchito, openly declared that he wanted to build a fentanyl empire. This was right before fentanyl started sweeping across America and killing tens of thousands of people every year. In September 2024, a US court found El Menchito guilty, and in March 2025, 2025, he was sentenced to life in prison. The son was behind bars, but at that point, the father was still a free man until the morning of February 22nd, 2026. In the operation we described at the very beginning, El Mencho was badly wounded and died from his injuries. But the moment word got out that he was dead, the CJNG went absolutely wild all across Mexico. A top cartel commander called El Tuli, El Mencho's right-hand man, immediately gave the order to launch coordinated attacks everywhere. He put a cash bounty of 20,000 Mexican pesos, roughly $1,100 per head. Just think about how insane that is. A criminal organization putting a price on the heads of soldiers from their own country's army. What followed was pure chaos. Cartel gunmen set fires in 20 different states across Mexico. Cars were burned, highways were completely blocked off, businesses were wrecked and destroyed. Over 250 roadblocks were thrown up, schools shut their doors, and flights were canceled. Mexico's second biggest city, Guadalajara, turned into a ghost town. Security experts said the CJNG's reaction had every sign of narco-terrorism, the kind of thing that happened in Colombia back in the 1980s when Pablo Escobar basically declared all-out war against the government. It looked like all the top CJNG bosses had come together and decided to attack the Mexican state at the same time from every direction. According to some analysts, if the cartel kept pushing this hard, it could lead to a full-blown war against the Mexican government. So, what happens now? El Mencho's family is basically out of the picture. His son is sitting in a U.S. prison. His wife got arrested on money laundering charges in Mexico back in November 2021. Both of his brothers are also locked up in Mexican jails. The 4 remaining CJNG commanders could now end up in a bloody fight among themselves over who gets to be in charge. Over in the U.S., the Trump administration has officially labeled the cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, and they haven't just been making announcements either. In September 2025, the U.S. military did something completely unprecedented. They started dropping bombs on boats they suspected of carrying drugs. Under something called Operation Southern Spear, at least 150 people have been killed across 44 separate strikes. America is blowing up vessels in the open ocean without any trial, without solid evidence, and without any legal process. Human rights organizations are calling this flat out illegal under international law, and many of the people killed were reportedly just ordinary fishermen going about their daily lives. On January 9th, Trump told Fox News that ground-level attacks inside Mexico against the cartels were also on the way. The U.S. Defense Secretary went as far as calling the cartels the Al-Qaeda of the Western Hemisphere. All of this has piled enormous pressure on Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum to take strong action. El Mencho's killing was the single biggest achievement of her government. She wanted to show the world, and especially the U.S., that Mexico was fully capable of handling its own cartel problem without needing American troops to come in and do it for them. But here's the big question that still hangs in the air. Will the drug cartels in Mexico ever actually be wiped out for good? History doesn't give us much reason for optimism. Every single time a drug lord goes down, 2 more show up to take his place. The deep-rooted problems are still sitting there completely unresolved. As long as Americans keep buying drugs, Mexico will keep supplying them. As long as guns keep flowing across the border from the US into Mexico, the cartels will keep fighting. As long as cartel money beats what a local police officer earns in a month, corruption will never go away. And as long as China keeps shipping the chemicals needed to make fentanyl and meth, the supply chain will stay open and running. This isn't just Mexico's problem, and it isn't just America's problem either. It is a crisis that both countries helped create together, and it will only get fixed if both countries genuinely work together to solve it.